question that we are going to see today is Experiential Ethnography from paper 1 Anthropology 2020. So directly to the definition. If you see, experiential anthropology has two words, or experiential ethnography has two words. What is the meaning of ethnography? Is description of cultures. Graphy means description. Graphy means description and ethno means culture, and hence ethnography is description of culture. What description of culture is about participant observation. That is, you are becoming a participant in that culture and you will be describing that culture. And hence, when you become a participant and observe the culture and you describe the culture, it is experiential ethnography. But we have to have a brief understanding or a history before writing this answer. So what is the history of experiential ethnography? So in history, if you see, description of culture has been done from a very long time, and this has been done, for example, if you see, there was a person called as Fa who came to India in the 5th century, and there was another person, Huang Xuang. He came around the 7th century during the time of Harsha. There were many other persons, Marco Polo. He came around 13th or 13th century. He came from Italy. He was a Venetian merchant. And there was one person called as Ibn Battuta from Morocco. He came around 14th century. He had written a book called as Rihla. All these, if you see, all these people, if you see, they had come from different countries. For what? They had come from different countries for observing the culture of different countries. And this is ethnography. But if you have to understand that these were all individuals. So these were all individuals. This had not developed into a discipline. So ethnography, or as a stream, as a discipline, when it started, means it started around 16th to 18th century. So this individual travel, which was happening at a very fast pace at that time, increased because of trade routes in 16th to 18th century, and there was a lot of collection. So now there was collection of data from all types of cultures, and hence now the discipline, or it seems to have started. Now ethnography or description of various culture now was taking place at a very fast time, and people were becoming attracted to this mode of cultural pursuit, and hence a lot of travel happened in that time. In the next phase, 18th to 19th century, this description of culture, this collection of culture, gave rise to colonialism. For example, 16th to 18th century, the person called as Columbus went in search of India, but he found America, where he describes that is what is ethnography, where he describes the people or people present in that as Red Indians, and he describes them or their culture and the ways they live, and this was taken in this material was taken to Europe, and hence in Europe they found that there is a very big land which can be colonized, and hence they started this process of colonialism. But in this colonialism also, collection of data continued. So in colonialism, data continued, for example, in India, Australia, Africa. Now data of cultures started pouring in like anything. So this cultural data 19th to 20th century, if you see, this data was used in the 19th and 20th century by people like classical evolutionist thinker like Taylor, Morgan. These classical evolutionists used this cultural data to justify their colonialism. For privy, that is, they were not experiencing any of the cultures which was present. They were just using the data which was being collected using all these travels which was happening, and they were hence called as armchair anthropologists. That is, they just sat in the chair and they started describing the culture. One example is very good example in history. In history is there was a person called as James Mill. This James Mill wrote a book called as History of British India. So he wrote a book called as History of British India. This History of British India book is where, for example, this is where the division of India into Hindu, Muslim and British rule. This compartmentalization of history of India into Hindu, Muslim and British rule was done by James Mill in this book called as History of India, and this book was mandatory for every civil servant. So every civil servant had to read this book before being posted in India. But if you see this division or this watertight division of Hindu, Muslim and British rule in India is not true. Indian history is a mixture or is a collage of all these civilization and culture mixing together into one civilization, and that was the very foundation or the greatness of our country, is that there is no compartmentalized history. There is continuity in history, and whoever came into India became India. And that is why if you see this armchair anthropologist description. So this armchair anthropologist description or armchair ethnographic description was faulty like this. That is the point which if you see James Mill's example and Taylor Morgan's example justifying colonialism not in a explicit way, but in a covert way. If you say some civilization is savage, barbarian, and it is some in Europe centric civilization are more developed, then it means that the other civilization are not that developed, and this is a faulty interpretation. And to correct this interpretation is what this person called as Malinowski came. And to correct this faulty interpretation, Malinowski came. He said that this armchair description or describing a culture just by sitting in our own country and not being able to visit the country and see the cultures present was a faulty way of describing, and hence he gave something called as on-field participant, or you become the participant of the culture which you observe, and then you describe the culture. And this description is what is called as experiential description. That is, you are experiencing the culture before describing the ethnographic details of the culture, and hence you are rectifying the fault. So you are rectifying the faulty nature of division of culture which had happened in the previous thing. So this is the basics of experiential ethnography. Now we will see some of the examples. There are many examples, but some of the examples are, if you one or two examples we will see, so that you can understand this experiential ethnography in a better way. So one example is, if you see, Vernier Elvin. So first example is Vernier Elvin. So who is this Vernier Elvin and what is he concerned with experiential anthropology? Is Vernier Elvin was actually a person who studied in Oxford, and he was a missionary. He was a Christian missionary who came to India for conversion. But what happened was, he actually experienced the tribe, experienced the Gond tribes. He experienced, or he was with the tribe in the region of Chota Nagpur Plateau, where he saw the culture, where he saw and experienced the culture. He experienced the culture. He even actually married one of the women from Gond tribe, and hence, because of this experiential ethnographic description which he did, he was able to understand the culture. So he was able to understand the culture and describe the culture with some empathy. For example, he described something called as Gotul. Gotul is youth dormitory. That is the tribe, the people of Gotul tribe actually send their children, or send their adult children to this youth dormitory, where sex education was given, where education was given, where understanding of culture, where cooperatism, where every detail was taught to the children in this Gotul. But this kind of youth dormitory was not seen as not seen as an appropriate thing by the external culture. Anthropologist who experiences those cultures was able to explain this in a better way, and hence Vernier Elvin can be given as an example. The second example you can give of a person called as S.C. Roy. S.C. Roy or Sarat Chandra Roy. He is the father of ethnography in India. Father of ethnography. So father of ethnography in India. So he describes, if you see, Munda tribe or Uran tribe, he actually experiences or he bees with the tribe, and he describes this culture. And same way as Vernier Elvin, he describes a youth dormitory here. In Uran, it is called as Dumkuria. So this youth dormitory actually is not seen as an appropriate way of sex education or education, or the importance and significance of this youth dormitory is not observed outside the culture. But S.C. Roy and Vernier Elvin, with their experiential ethnographic details, were able to give forward that this youth dormitory was a very essential thing for the cultural development of that tribe. The next example we can give is of a person called as Geets. Geets. You can say that Geets, if you see Bali's cockfight, this cockfight can be seen as a very primitive way of culture. But Geets, with the help of experiential anthropology or experiential ethnography, he goes into that place, he lives in that place, he bees with those people, and he becomes one of the person. He becomes one of the participant observing the Bali's cockfight, and hence he comes up with his book called as Interpretation of Culture, where he describes the symbolic significance of that cockfight, and hence this was taken forward in a big way. And the next example you can give, of course, is of Malinowski, Trobriand Island. You can say Malinowski, Trobriand Island, as first described. He was the person. Being an experiential ethnographer, you will be able to describe some very intimate systems or intimate case studies, like Kula system, which is an economic way of transaction in the Trobriand Islands. This could not be understood by armchair anthropologists. Coming to that answer, so how to write the answer? So it's a 10-mark question. It's a 2-page answer. So first is definition. So experiential ethnography. Experiential, it's a definition. Experiential ethnography. As I said, ethnography is describing or description of a culture. Experiential is participant observation, or you become a participant in observing the culture. So you describe the culture being a participant. Second, you give the geographical distribution, which we now saw. Can describe the example as I quoted of S.C. Roy to Vernier Elwin and 3 Geets for Malinowski. You can actually use many other examples. I am using 4 examples. You can actually use many other examples. So second point should be the distribution. Third should be conditions essential. So what are the conditions essential? So if you are going to go to the field and you have to become a participant of observing a culture, you have to satisfy a set of condition which Malinowski gives. What Malinowski says is that you should know the local language. So for experiencing what is the culture, you have to know the local language, otherwise it becomes very difficult for you to understand that process. Also residency, that is, you should be in that culture, for a very long time. For example, if you see Vernier Elwin and all was present among the Gonds, tribe for a very long time. He lived with them, he was with them, and hence he was able to experience their culture in a better way than the people who described the culture from outside. And hence the second point is residency. Third point is participating. You are not only observing the culture, you become participant in the culture. When you become participant in the culture, you actually take steps for understanding the reality of the culture, and hence you have to become a participant. This is the third point. Fourth point, what are the techniques for data collection? So what are the techniques you will use for data collection? You can use many techniques as given by Malinowski. You can use interviews. You can interview the person. You can collect the genealogies. This is what Geets did before in Bali's cockfight. You can actually get case studies. So you can get case studies. This is what Trobriand Island Kula system. You can get important case studies to understand the ethnography. So there are very many techniques for data collection. I have described 3. You can write more also. Fifth point. So fifth point should be, so once you have collected the data, the next thing should be analysis. So you have collected the data, now you are analyzing the data. So analyzing the data, for example, there are 2 ways in analyzing the data. That is, you have a theory in mind. So you have a theory in mind, you go to that place, you collect the data, you interpret it. You already have a theory in mind, and hence your interpretation will actually be very aligned to that theory, and this is called as experimental. This is experimental ethnography. But analysis of data without any theory You go there, you observe the data, you see the reality, you describe this reality. You describe this reality because of experience. You describe this reality because of experience is called as experiential ethnography, and hence the analysis of data should be in this way. That is, you have to go with no preconceived or preconceived notion or theory or framework before collecting the data. The description should be after you collect the data. So you collect the data, you see the reality, then you describe. So then you describe the culture or the ethnography. That is what is called as experiential ethnography. The sixth point is, you can say, advantages. There are many advantages. So one is, you can record natural behavior. So you can record the natural, what is happening, you can record. For example, Geats becomes a member of because of some help that he does for the people of that area. He becomes one of the members of that cockfight, and hence he was able to observe the natural condition of that culture. And you will also get very in-depth and wide analysis, very wide analysis. Armchair anthropologists and all did not get any depth or wider perspective of a culture, but if you see Malinowski, Vernier, Elvin were able to get very wide understanding of a culture. So sixth point is advantage. Seventh point, disadvantage. So what you have to say in disadvantage, obviously subjectivity might arise. So when you are obviously becoming part of a when you are becoming a part of a system, you actually invest your emotional energy into that culture, and hence subjectivity in describing a culture may arise, and that can be a negative thing. And exclusion, that is, when you become a part of a culture, when you become a part of a, or you participate in a culture, that group in which you are part, may actually be an enemy of some other group. So you will be excluded from group 2, you will be excluded from group 3. This conflict may arise because of being part of one group, and that can also be a problem. So this is subjectivity. Exclusion can be a negative thing. So eighth point is conclusion. Eighth point, or you can say significance. You can say significance of experiential ethnography. What is the significance? Significance one, I say you can say Panchashil or tribal Panchashil. So if you see, tribal Panchashil is a theory, or is a policy in India, where it is said that tribal should have their autonomy, tribal should have their own governance, tribal should be protected of their culture. This was given by Jawaharlal Nehru. But if you go back a little, you will observe that this tribal Panchashil, which was given by Jawaharlal Nehru, was influenced by none other than Vernier Elvin. This was influenced, or this was given because of the influence of Vernier Elvin. And such an important policy of India, how it came about? Because of experiential ethnographic description of Gond tribe and the cultural phenomena which Vernier Elvin observed because of the observation he did. So Panchashil, tribal Panchashil, significance you can give. Then you can say that cultural relativism. As I said, this Dumkuria or Gotul or youth dormitories can be seen as a negative impact from outside. But when you are observing, when you are experiencing their culture, you will understand the significance and importance of youth dormitories, which can be possible only through participant observation of these cultural traits. Third, you can say significance is empathy. Because some phenomena or most of the phenomena explained by the armchair anthropologist led to many difficult colonial expansions and a description of cultures of Africa, Asia and Australia in a very bad way. But when experiential ethnographic started and the description of culture based on the participant observation started, an empathy towards different types of culture began, and this is a very big transition which the description of culture and anthropology as a discipline took. So this is how you write this answer. So thank you.